Almost there.
All right, let me just say a few words. There's a lot that's going on in D.C., then I'll stop. You can ask me any questions you want. Let me start off by saying that Trump's big, beautiful bill, in my view, is the worst and most destructive piece of legislation in the modern history of this country. It is really horrendous. What it does is make massive cuts in Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, the result of which some 45,000 people in our own state are going to lose health insurance. 17 million Americans are going to lose their health insurance. The cost of health insurance for the average person is going to go up. It will be devastating for hospitals, for nursing homes, and for community health centers. And then not only is this legislation a disaster for healthcare at a time when our healthcare system is already broken, it's making massive cuts to nutrition programs, literally taking away food from hungry kids, and making it harder for young people to get the education they need. And why did all that happen? What was the cause of massive cuts to healthcare, education, and nutrition? It was precisely so that Trump could give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1%, the wealthiest people in this country, who in fact have never ever had it so good. $900 billion in tax breaks to large corporations. There are estimates out there that as a result of this legislation, over 50,000 Americans will die every year unnecessarily because they'll no longer be able to get to a doctor on time. And that's what we're seeing in order to give tax breaks to wealthy campaign contributors. So that is a disaster, and all I can say as the ranking member of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, I'm going to do the best that I can do, working hopefully with some Republicans to try to alleviate some of these horrible, horrible provisions. Now, in addition to all of that, what I want to say and what I want to mention is that I have very great fears that under Trump, this country is moving toward an authoritarian society. And what we are seeing is Trump usurping the powers of Congress. In other words, Congress has the power to pass appropriations bill and make sure that that money is spent. That's what the law is about. And he is moving very much against that principle. What we are seeing is attacks on universities because he doesn't like the courses they teach, attacks on law firms, attacks on the courts. He will or will not decide to obey court orders, unprecedented. And maybe, to me, maybe the most dangerous is a very aggressive attack against the media in this country. Media which he calls fake news. Anyone who disagrees with them is perpetuating, in his view, fake news. So what that means is not only the significant reduction in funding for public broadcasting, PBS, NPR, it means lawsuits that he has waged against ABC, Meta, recently the Wall Street Journal, CBS, and I worry very much. I don't happen to believe that Stephen Colbert's cancellation was economic. It may have had something to do with that. I think it was a political decision as well. So this is what we're up against right now. We have an administration that wants to give massive tax breaks to its wealthy campaign contributors and the richest people in this country, cutting health care, and at the same time moving this country toward an authoritarian society. And this is something that all of us should be concerned about. So both in Washington as a member of the United States Senate and as somebody who is active politically all over this country, we're going to do everything we can to address these crises. Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak about the $6 million you were able to
Yeah,
get from
good. In the midst of all of that, what the Trump administration is doing is refusing to release substantial sums of money for education and in other areas. And I'm very happy to say I've had lengthy discussions with Linda McMahon, who is the Secretary of Education, and others have as well. And we have managed to get the release of some $6 million for Vermont for summer programs and after-school programs. We were also successful in getting the release of some $17 million for school districts all over the state. We've worked very hard with the state, with school districts to make that happen. So that is partial success, and that will help a lot of struggling school districts. But the truth is that most of the money in those appropriations bills are still being held illegally by the administration. So we've had some success, and I'm proud of that. We're going to continue to work on that. But most of the money is still being held illegally by the administration.
You referenced harm mitigation campaign at the committee level.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little more precisely about what that's going to look like and what specifically you're going to be asking for?
Right now, I worry very much. I mean, essentially what we're going to try to do in a piecemeal fashion, as best as we can, is to undo the damage of that legislation. So, for example, at a time when federally qualified community health centers, something that I've worked very, very hard on, are struggling here in Vermont and all over this country, the massive cuts to Medicaid are going to be have a very negative impact on them. As we speak, we're working right now with others on the Health Committee to see if we can increase funding for community health centers, similarly with nursing homes as well. So it's not going to solve the problem, but at least we want to mitigate some of the damage. I should also mention that while we're on the subject, we brought in some $4.1 million several years ago to expand primary health care in Windham County, in the southern part of the state, Brattleboro area. And unfortunately, that project has dragged on for much too long. I'm happy to announce that I think, finally, we are making some progress between North Star, which is the Springfield federally qualified health center, which will expand to the Brattleboro area and to Putney, working with Brattleboro Memorial Hospital. So I hope that we're going to see an expansion of primary health care in Windham County in the near future.
Senator, I think at the end of the year there's subsidies for Affordable Care Act health insurance, or excuse me, the Affordable Care Act health insurance subsidies are sunsetting at the end of the year. Do you see a political will among your Republican colleagues to renew those?
Well, look, this is what, as some of you know, I have been running all over the country, and will continue to do that, and that is precisely why we do it. We go into districts which have Republican members of Congress, often members who have won by slim margins, and we are telling the people in those districts, whether it's Omaha, Nebraska, or in Texas, or wherever it may be, this is what's in the bill. Put pressure on your members of Congress. Hopefully we'll have some success, but that is certainly what our goal is. Our goal is to get the American people to understand. I'll give you one example, what this bill does. Texas is one of the most conservative states in this country. Both of their senators voted for this horrific, big, beautiful bill. In Texas, the rate of uninsured will go up to close to 20%. Can you imagine that? In the richest country on earth, in a state, we're going to have close to 20%. In Vermont, it's going to go from 3.3 to 6%. That's a disaster. But you have states that vote Republican where the uninsured rate is going to go up to 20%. I mean, that is so far off the scale compared to other wealthy nations that it's almost indescribable.
Senator, you had Congresswoman AOC and Congressman Paul Tonkin in the North Country this past weekend. They were also advocating for some of the similar things you just said. Why is it important when you have someone like Elise Stefanik coming back and saying, well, they're going to see the benefits during tax season?
Yeah, they ain't going to see the benefits. One of the things that we're dealing with is a lot of lies and misinformation. There is nobody in Congress that I know of who would have allowed working class people to see those provisions be rescinded and allow taxes to go up. That's nonsense. The essence of what this bill is about, and every person who voted for it has to be held accountable. The essence of what this bill is about, massive cuts to health care and tax breaks for billionaires. So if anyone tells you, well, if Congress didn't act, your taxes would have gone up, Of course, Congress would not have allowed that to happen. Nobody I know, you get on the phone, I don't care whether you're conservative, progressive, nobody thought that that would happen or wanted to see that happen. That is just the fig leaf. What these guys are doing, and it touches on another very fundamental issue which we don't talk about enough, and that is we have a campaign finance system which is absolutely corrupt. And that is the reason that a lot of what happens in Congress happens, because if members of Congress do not support what the billionaires and the oligarchs want, they will be primaried and thrown out of office by people who have unlimited amounts of money. And that's also what this legislation is about.
What sorts of stopgap measures do you think elected officials at the state level should be pursuing to...
Within the state government?
Within state government.
I don't envy the legislature and the government. I mean, they're already struggling with serious problems regarding healthcare, education, etc. That's dead. I'm not going to, recommend to them what they can do. But I think clearly in Vermont we have serious problems with high property taxes, and clearly in Vermont we are paying some of the highest rates in the country for healthcare. So, and this terrible piece of legislation is going to make a bad situation worse. So I would hope, and I'm happy to play a role in that, that we sit down with the leaders in the healthcare community, the state government, and figure out the best that we can do. And in my view, and what we're trying to do right now in the southern part of the state, and what we have done all over the state, is to put a greater emphasis on primary health care. Because at the end of the day, if we can keep people healthy, if we have a process by which when you're sick you can walk into the doctor's office, not only do you keep people healthy, but you save money. Because going to an emergency room or ending up in the hospital is a very, very expensive proposition. So the idea of how we keep people out of emergency rooms, out of the hospital, how we keep people from getting sicker than they should be a primary focus on healthcare in Vermont, and in fact, across the country.
Senator, what do you make of the argument from some of your Republican colleagues, basically, that some of these individuals that are being taken off of medication shouldn't have been on there in the first place? People that
I think a lot of that,
or...
This is what, look, I've been through this a million times. You remember Trump in his State of the Union speech talking about how millions and millions of people, 150 years old, 500 years old, collecting Social Security? It's a lie. So what happens is when you have tens and tens of millions of people in any process, is there going to be people taking advantage of the program? Of course, there is. In terms of Social Security, over 99% of the people who get benefits are entitled to them. So I'm not going to here to tell you that when tens of millions of people utilize the program, that there is not a problem in the program. There is. I'm sure that there is. But do not kid yourselves. They will use every excuse in the world to cut health care in order to give tax breaks to their billionaire supporters. That is the essence of what this whole legislation is about.
Senator, what are your thoughts on the flash flooding we saw hit Vermont again a week and a half ago, and everything going on with FEMA as well?
Well, among many other things in this big, terrible bill, massive cutbacks to our ability to deal with the existential threat of climate change. We have a president who insanely, despite all of the scientific evidence, believes that climate change is a hoax. And consistent with that view, he is cutting back on all efforts to try to move this country to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And I fear very much that what we have seen in Vermont this year and in the last couple of years, what we saw recently with the horror in Texas, what we saw in North Carolina, what you're seeing all over the world is only going to get worse, because you have a president who is indebted to the fossil fuel industry. So clearly, we need to protect FEMA. We need to make FEMA more efficient, more responsive to local concerns. But the idea of dismantling FEMA or cutting back is at a time when communities are going to see more and more flooding and other types of disasters is a terrible mistake.
Because of the work that you're doing out on visiting communities, and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is doing as well, what's your confidence level that you can flip the Senate?
Senate will be harder, but in the House, the Republicans have more or less a 4 or 5 vote majority. That's not much. Now, what they're going to try to do, going to Texas right now, is to try to see if they can increase it by doing some outrageous gerrymandering. But I think if we can get the word out to people, and I think we are beginning to do that, that what Trumpism is about is massive tax breaks for billionaires and cuts to the programs that the working class of this country desperately need. And if we can go to those communities where Republicans have won by small margins, I think there is a reasonable chance that we can flip the House. And the significance of that, which Trump very well understands, is that if we can flip the House, we can put a significant stop to this reactionary agenda of the president. The Senate will be harder, not impossible. And the goal, again, is to the degree that we can get out and talk to people, there's a chance that we can do that as well. And I will be active in those processes.
How has this recent rescission vote affected your strategic calculus as it relates to the next federal budget?
What do you mean by that?
Well, Senator Murkowski has said this undermines faith.
Well, she voted for it, you know.
Not for the rescission package, she did.
Oh, for the rescission package. Well, look, the rescission package is $9 billion, and that's, you know, the big thing in there was foreign aid. And again, on foreign aid, what we have seen is the dismantling in a tragic, tragic way of USAID. You know, I think Americans, for a long time, felt pride in knowing that we were helping the poorest people in the world, in Africa, in Asia, elsewhere, stay alive. It costs sometimes pennies a day to provide the medicine that sick kids need, or the food that starving people need. And I think most Americans were proud of that. And the dismantling of USAID and this rescission package continue that process means that all over the world, people are no longer going to look to the United States and say thank you for helping the most vulnerable people. So,
Senator, what do you think about the increase in funds going to border communities? Like
the increase of what?
In funds going to border
Funds going to border.
communities.
Well, I worry very much about the growth of ICE. I think there is a general understanding that we need to have strong border security. There is, I think, a general understanding that undocumented people who are criminals should be thrown out of this country. But there is also, I think, a general feeling that undocumented immigrants in Vermont, on farms, or throughout this country, who are working very, very hard in some of the most difficult and underpaid work in the country. And these are folks who are harvesting our crops in California and Texas, people working in meatpacking plants, people working in nursing homes, people working in child care centers, people who, by the way, during COVID, were the essential workers who maintained our economy, and more than a few of them died in the process. I think the American people are not happy about seeing people in civilian clothing with masks around their faces, grabbing folks, throwing them into vans and taking them to God knows where. And that's an issue we're going to spend a lot more time on. I think, again, what Trump is doing, and what I detest about Trumpism, he is doing what authoritarians have always done. And that is, you take a powerless minority, people who don't have any political power, and you try to foment hatred against them, so that people will focus on that issue. Oh my God, I've got to get rid of the undocumented. Meanwhile, 17 million people lose their health care. Kids are not going to have a decent diet because we cut back on nutrition. Young people are not going to be able to go to college. We don't worry about that. Let's focus on mass deportation. So I think the American people are beginning to understand that in a democracy, you don't have thousands and thousands of federal agencies. In fact, what you're looking at here is, for the first time in our history, a very large domestic, if you like, security operation. of people patrolling our cities and our communities. And I worry about that very, very much. All right, with that, guys, I got to catch a plane. Okay, well, thank you all very much. Take care.